And as the MC of this event, my job basically is to make sure that we start on time, end on time, that things kind of flow properly. And so one of the things I do is we always give our guests at the end of the program a gift. It's a gift called Reimagining Greenville. It is written by John Boyanowski. And I'm going to bring John Boyanowski to the stage here shortly to introduce our keynote speaker. John's company is Complete Public Relations, and he is a longtime member of the Chamber of Leadership and Cults, and also an author. So as I'm checking to make sure that we got the book and we've got the inscription proper, I look inside the book. It's going to be our gift at the end, and the inscription reads, "To Dick, I apologize in advance for my introduction." John Boyanowski. So please help me bring to the stage author, entrepreneur, chamber champion, John Boyanowski.
Good morning. As Steve said earlier, they had a lot of trouble finding a speaker for today. I think they had much more trouble trying to find someone to do an introduction if they found me and asked me to do this. But I asked Tripp why, and he said, well, Dick's looked at a basically long career, and we need to truncate down to about 45 seconds. And no one truncates stuff better than you in Greenville, I said. Okay, that sounds good. Well, it's a great pleasure to introduce Mr. Wilkerson tonight, or this morning. I've known him the last few years from Habitat for Humanity. I do a lot of work with him. He has been our chairman of our board. But for those who don't know Mr. Wilkerson, he's led a quite interesting life. He went through 12 different schools by the time he graduated high school, is that correct? He swears that's because he was in a military family, had nothing to do with his academic record whatsoever. While in school, he fell in love with science and math, decided he wanted to pursue an engineering degree. That was a good thing. For the North Carolina fans in the room, the bad things he chose Duke to do that. I guess there's not many Duke fans. I'm playing to the crowd, Mr. Wilkerson. After graduation, he went to work for Procter & Gamble, and he spent 11 years there. Started in Cincinnati and moved 4 different times. That's a lot of moving for one person in 11 years. So in 1979, he interviewed with Michelin and fell in love with the international flair of the company. They offered him a job, and not knowing at the time that 30 years later, he would rise to become the president and chairman, CEO of Michelin North America in August 2008. This is where I get really fascinated by Dick's story. We can talk about metrics and numbers and tire sales that he did, but he did some really fascinating things from a personal side growing Michelin. When you're a president of a company that large, you're going to have a lot of great meetings, a lot of boardrooms, a lot of high-end lunches. Most of the time he ate lunch in the cafeteria with the rest of the employees because he wanted to know who they were. Because he felt that to be a good leader of a company that size, he needed to know who the people were who were working for him. So that's an interesting little leadership skill he did. He was also very involved in the community, a lot of things he did, but my favorite was he created Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, which raised almost $200,000 for, let me get the name of it right, the Michelin Challenge Education Program. He retired from Michelin in 2011, but he has not slowed down one bit. He is still very active in the community. He sits on the, I love this is a man who knows his political world, the Clemson University President's Advisory Board, and the University of South Carolina National Advisory Council. So he knows, he went to Duke, when he came here, he knew which he had to play, he couldn't play favorites. He's been involved in United Way, Greenville Symphony, the JDC, Habitat for Humanity, and of course the Chamber. I want to give a big welcome, round of applause from us to Mr. Dick Wilkerson.
Thank you. I'm not a podium person, so I hope you're okay. Is the sound system working? Good, good. I have a confession to make. I thought this was supposed to be a lunch meeting. And only this week, when Tripp sent me the agenda, did I realize that not only was I going to have to wear a tie for the first time in a long time, but I was going to have to put it on early in the morning in retiree hours. So part of me is here, and I hope the rest of me will join us during this talk. When Tripp asked me to speak, my first comment was, hey, I'm not an entrepreneur. It's true, I'm a partner now in a small business, which has yet to start up because of the bureaucracy of government permits, but we're dangerously close. So I thought I'd talk about my career and lessons learned. Now, you're thinking 44 years, this is going to be a long breakfast. I assure you we're not going to stop at each year. Okay? But I'd like to talk about the events in my life that led me to believe what I do about leadership. And we'll do it in chronological order and end up with entrepreneurship and the small company that we're starting up. And then a little bit about my passion for diversity also. The first event in my life that really started changing my view of leadership was actually when I was a senior in high school. My older brother was a year ahead of me in high school. I come from a military family. My dad spent 37 years in the Marine Corps. And any Marines in the crowd? Yeah. Good group. Thank you for your service. But as a senior in high school, my brother went to the Naval Academy, and I was thinking of a career in the service also. I had an NROTC scholarship to Duke University, but I was considering the Air Force Academy. And I went for my physical for the Air Force Academy, and lo and behold, they discovered a malignant tumor on my thyroid gland and took out my thyroid, and with it they extracted all that money that was going to go for my scholarship to Duke University. Because I hadn't started, they felt perfectly comfortable saying it's no longer available. You know, I was 16, and when you're 16, you don't worry about the health consequences, and in fact, I've never had a problem. But what you do worry about is where am I going to go to school? And Duke gave me a partial academic scholarship and the opportunity to earn my meals by busing dishes in a student dining hall. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's it like to clean dishes for rich kids? Right? It's okay. That was perhaps the best thing that happened to me when I started college. I learned really two powerful lessons. Number one is I really got to know and love the people who were permanent employees in the dining hall. I mean, they were salted earth folks. They worked every day, did a job that's not highly respected, talked about their supervisors. Anybody feeling awkward? And I learned a lot listening to them and interacting with them. The second thing I learned was observing the students and how they interacted with me as I cleaned their dishes. Some of them felt sorry for me, which I really didn't appreciate. Some of them treated me just like one of their friends, and I was. And then there was a small group of about 15% who looked down on me because I was cleaning dishes for my meals. And from that I learned a powerful lesson, and that is, there's nothing quite so ugly as somebody who's born on third base and acts like they hit a triple. That posturing, it makes it almost impossible for someone to follow you as a leader when you behave that way. And the people around me hated that. And it made me understand that leadership and how you behave is key. So when I speak, I usually speak about leadership. And by leadership, what I mean is the process that a person uses to create energy in an organization and to focus that energy. You manage things, you lead people. The second thing is, as I went through business, it became more evident to me than ever that there are about 3 different ways that you can have competitive advantage in your business. One is to have product advantage. Michelin has that. We've had it for a long time. But the half-life of product advantage is 3 to 5 years these days. People can re-engineer, reverse engineer your product and equal it in a 3 to 5 year time frame. So if you're not continuing to invest in that, they're going to catch up. The second is financial advantage. You may have a lower interest rate, you may have more access to funds, you have a larger credit line, you may have hedged. You know, Southwest Airlines was famous a few years ago when oil prices were rising very rapidly. They had hedged oil prices. They had bought futures at lower price. And they were making money while the airline industry was losing money. So it's a financial advantage. But there's a half-life to that too. Because guess what? When oil prices came back down, Southwest Airlines was stressed more than the other airlines. The third way is much more long-lasting, and that is having a knowledgeable and motivated workforce. If you have a knowledgeable and motivated workforce, it is if you don't have one, it's almost impossible to rapidly change that. In fact, the bigger the organization, the more difficult it is to change that. And it all depends on leadership. It all depends on leadership. People are the only asset a company has that grow in value. Everything else you invest in, you depreciate. Who's in real estate here? We used to say real estate appreciated in value. How do you feel about that now? Oh, I know, you're getting a sales pitch right now. But we know that it can vary too. But if you invest in people, they become more valuable in your organization. I studied engineering at Duke. I had 2 reasons for doing that. Number one is I heard that if you had an engineering degree, you could get a job. Seemed like a really good idea to me. Beat busting dishes too. The second reason was you didn't have to study a foreign language to get an engineering degree. God has a sense of humor. Later on, when I worked at Michelin, you'll hear the first thing I did was go to French class. I went off to work for Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was supervising what's called the packed dentifrice department. We were making pressed toothpaste for the eastern part of the United States. So if you brushed your teeth in the 1970s, my team probably made your toothpaste. I was supervising about 55 people. I was 21 years old, and they were all obviously older than me. And a supply man worked for me named Tom Lawson. I'll never forget Tom's name because of the event I'll tell you about. Tom was a supply man. He supplied pack materials to the dentifrice packing lines. And Tom was a good guy. One of my responsibilities was to post the overtime sheet because there was a commitment that the person who had the lowest overtime so far that year would get the first opportunity for the next overtime. And for a lot of reasons, none of which ended up being very good, I was late posting the overtime sheet one week, and Tom missed out on an opportunity for overtime. I was working B shift at that time. We rotated back and forth. And I came in at 3:30, and Tom was waiting for me. Tom came up to me and said, "You were late posting the overtime sheet, and I lost 4 hours of overtime. What are you going to do about it?" And I explained to Tom, "You're right. It was my mistake. But you know that you're now low on the overtime sheet, and you'll get the next opportunity." Every time I saw Tom for the next 2 hours, he said to me, "You were late posting the overtime sheet, and I lost out on overtime." And I would go through the same explanation. 2 hours of, "You were late posting the overtime sheet." After 2 hours, about 5:30 in the evening, Tom changed his tactic. Tom came to me and said, "What if I get sick? What if I get sick? You won't be able to give me those 4 hours overtime I lost. What if I get sick?" And he was pretty angry about it. And I explained to him again and again, I'm sorry, but Tom didn't turn loose. And for the next 2 hours, every time Tom saw me, Richard Harris, he said, "You were late, and what if I get sick?" And at 9:30 that night, I looked at Tom and I said, "If you get sick, you'll do me a personal damn favor." How do you think I felt? I felt pretty good. Until 15 minutes later, the phone rang. And Mr. Seitz was on the phone. Mr. Seitz was the head of manufacturing for the Ivordale area of Procter & Gamble. And Mr. Seitz was kind enough to explain to me that when I accepted a management position with Procter & Gamble, it meant that I no longer had the right to be a smart aleck with people. And he was right. Think about it. The posturing I saw when I was at Duke University from rich kids looking down on me, and what I had just done. What I had just done. So, that one instant, I lost Tom. Even though I went back out and apologized to him, the relationship between Tom and me was never the same. And you can make a case that Tom was misbehaving. But if you aspire to be a leader, you have to respect all the people, even when they don't behave well. And it was a powerful lesson for me. After Cincinnati, I was transferred down to Jackson, Tennessee. Anybody from Tennessee know where Jackson is? Show of hands. Pringles, I was making, it was a startup plant, Pringles potato chips, the most technically intense process that Procter & Gamble had ever attempted. We used to say that if you lived in Jackson, Tennessee, you had to drive a long way and spend a lot of money to have fun. You'd had to go to Memphis or Nashville. But we were in the middle of a startup. There were 6 lines. Each line was about 150 yards long, all automated, all very complex to manufacture Pringles potato chips. And I had a team. There were 18 teams in the plant, and one of the teams was mine. And everything that Procter & Gamble had taught me about leadership, I was diligently trying to apply. I had a great group of people working with me. And in fact, on our line, we ran 2/3 of the good production the first year on my team. We were respected as the most knowledgeable team in the plant. And the first time an opportunity came for promotion to department head, I didn't get it. I didn't feel entitled, don't misunderstand. It was just, I thought with all the things we were doing, with all the performance that my team had had, that I would have been a good candidate for that position. And it was like somebody hit me in the stomach. I remember that day deeply in my career wondering, what in the world went wrong? Fortunately, I had a senior guy who was helping me at the time. And I remember him coming to me, buying me a cup of coffee, putting his arm around my shoulder and saying, Dick, you have the best team in the plant, but what are you doing to help anybody else? So part of the challenge of leadership is not just respecting the people that work with you, it's respecting the people who are all around you and sharing that knowledge. And again, another lesson that came from my own failure, but very powerful in my thinking about how to be a good leader. I did get promoted out of Jackson, Tennessee, and in fact, spent another 8 years with P&G. Procter & Gamble came to me and said, gee, we'd like for you to go to Staten Island, New York, and head up our operation, second oldest in the company, which is organized by the Teamsters Union. I had spent my career up to that point starting up new non-union plants, enjoying the freedom and the passion that comes with that. They told me this would round out my career. I had been around long enough not to say no at that point. I just said, I'll think about it. And coincidentally, I got a phone call from A.T. Kearney in Chicago that said Michelin had my name and wanted to talk to me. And so I came on up here. I was in Georgia at the time, came on up to Greenville and interviewed with Michelin and got the standard offer from Michelin. Come to work for us and have fun. And I said, doing what? And at that point in time, we didn't tell anybody, so the offer was still the same, come to work for us and have fun. And I finally decided, not knowing what I was going to do in Greenville, South Carolina, was far better than knowing exactly what I was going to have to do in Staten Island, New York. Now, how many New Yorkers have I offended? Okay, well, you're here, you know, right? Okay, yeah, I said that. So I came to work for Michelin in May 1980, and immediately got parachuted into French class, which, again, the good Lord was laughing hilariously at that point in time. Went to France, came back, and I was heading up a department down at our Sandy Springs plant, making plated wire cord, tie cord for our manufacturing facilities. It was a good-sized department, about 120 people, and when I first came back, I wanted to get to know those people, so my goal was in the first 3 months to spend 30 minutes getting to know each person. And my son was born in 1980, and I came across a guy, Jim, whose son was also born in 1980, but he had been born in Anderson. My son was born here in Greenville at the old Greenville Hospital, where they didn't allow fathers in the delivery room. Damn. You understand, I cannot, you know, they would have to carry me out. I'm just not into it. But I was really curious because Jim had gone through the training with his wife, and he talked about that. And I said, well, tell me what it was like, Jim. And he said, I wasn't there. I said, gosh, I'm really sorry, what happened? And he said, well, I was working C shift, which is 11:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning. And the phone call came about 1:30 a.m. that my wife was going to the delivery room. And I went to see my supervisor. And my supervisor said, there's somebody off sick and I let somebody else off vacation. And if you leave, we won't be able to make our production tonight. And it may shut down one of our tire plants. And he stayed. He stayed. The supervisor wasn't a bad guy. He just misunderstood. He thought the customer trumps the individual need at this point. But let's play it out further. Let's say that you and I are part of Jim's team. I'm Jim. And it's 2:30 now in the morning. And we're coming to break. And we're sitting around the table. And I go, and you say, what's wrong, Jim? And I say, I guess Judy's giving birth right now. And you say, now this is C-shift in a manufacturing facility. This is not polite. This is not, what are you doing here? It's all the symbols you see in the cartoons. That's what it is, okay? It's like, what are you doing here? And I say, well, you know, we have somebody out sick and somebody on vacation. If I weren't here, we wouldn't supply a tire plant. And the supervisor asked me to stay. What do you think the odds are production goals are going to be met that night?
Well, zero.
Zero. What do you think the odds are that that story is going to spread like wildfire and affect how other people feel? Hugely. Hugely. The supervisor just didn't understand the opportunity that he had been presented. And that opportunity is to come to the team and say, I know I let somebody off on vacation, we have somebody sick, but Jim must be at that hospital. So I'm going to work with you, and we're going to do the best we can. And that would have been a motivating factor. And the supervisor understood that. And again, he was a good supervisor, just made a terrible mistake. But when somebody's treated unfairly like that, it doesn't go away, does it? How many of you in your careers have felt really unfairly treated? Show of hands, don't be shy. Just about everybody. Do you remember it well? You remember the feeling? Yeah. You do, it stays with you. And it stayed with Jim. He left the company 2 years later. And I know why he left. Every time his son had a birthday, what do you think he was thinking? He was thinking, this is the day that Michelin, not my supervisor, but Michelin would let me off. I work with a senior guy who often has said, good managers know the world's not fair. And my response to him has always been, good leaders never quit trying to make it fair for their people. So a challenge of leadership is respecting people, but it's also using the power that you have to to try to make it fair. People know sometimes it's not possible, but if they don't think you care, you can't expect them to work hard. You destroy energy in the organization, and the role of the leader is to create that energy. Later on, I was managing a group where at Michelin, we, in the mid-1980s, decided to ban tobacco products from all our facilities, all tobacco products. And the first day of the ban, one of the best operators we had showed up chewing tobacco. I know you thought I was going to say smoking in the bathroom or something, but no, he was chewing tobacco. And his supervisor came in and said, "Dick, we got this guy up there chewing tobacco, I'm going to write him up." Now, you got to remember, Walter was really a good guy, an outstanding operator, always there, and he was chewing tobacco. I told the supervisor, "Hang on a second, let me talk to Walter." So I went out to talk to Walter on the line, and everywhere Walter went, I went with him. And I talked to him about the weather. I talked to him about Clemson football, which was fairly good then. Dan Ford was coach. I shouldn't have went on the field. Pardon me. We talked about the weather. We talked about everything. And after 30 minutes, Walter was looking pretty green. Any of you ever chew tobacco? Any of you ever feel the need to politely put expectorate? After 30 minutes, I put my arm around Walter and said, "Walter, you're a hell of a man to chew and not spit for 30 minutes. But I'd sure appreciate it if you didn't use tobacco products here anymore." And he said, "Yes, sir, I never will." And he did. And he and I laughed about that from time to time. But the point is, look at what would have happened had Walter been written up. What do you think Walter would have said? "I'm a really good operator, I'm here all the time, and the first time I do something wrong, they write me up and make it formal." Again, destroying energy in the organization. Now, I'm not saying don't have standards. I'm simply saying, given a choice between rigid consistency and fairness, I encourage managers to be consistently fair. And what that means is consider the person before you decide what you're going to do. It's important. Well, as was told earlier, in 2008, the company asked me to become chairman and president, and 3 months later, the economy took a huge nosedive. I didn't cause it. It was not my fault. But it was scary. We went from monthly profitability to, oh my God, in like 2 months. And immediately, our executive committee commissioned, I think it was 9 different teams to quickly assess and take action to keep us from really getting in dire straits. I know many of you in small business felt it too, but we went from very profitable to losing big money in like a 3-month time frame. And I'm sitting there wondering, what in the world am I going to do? What am I going to do? We started taking the actions, and one of the groups that I commissioned was manufacturing costs. And that group came back after a week and said their conclusion was that we needed to lay off 500 people. Now we have about 12,000 people in manufacturing. 500 doesn't sound like much unless you're one of the 500, right? And we had never laid off in the Michigan plant. And I said, "You came back with the wrong answer, go back and restudy it, give you some options." They came back a week later and said, "We're glad you sent us back, you're right, we came up with the wrong answer. It really needs to be 800 people." I said, "We're simply not going to do that. We're going to figure out another way." And in fact, we figured out a way to reduce hours. We went from average person on a rotating shift working 42 hours to 35, and in some very difficult cases to 32 hours. But we maintained all their benefits. We maintained their support. We provided all sorts of financial counseling. I mean, 35 hours sounds good until you were living on 42, and then all of a sudden the car payment and house payment are a lot heavier than they used to be. So this is not a discount. Our people were sacrificing for this. And I visited the plants routinely, and people came to us and said, thank you for not laying us off. Thank you for maintaining our benefits. And in fact, productivity in our plants during that period of time went up. People understood what was needed. People understood that it was our life that was at stake, and they really responded. In April and May 2009, the company's results in North America had dramatically turned around. I mean, it was better than we could have ever imagined, and we were making significant amounts of money. And the first thing we did was go back to those people. And on a Friday in June, every supervisor received a bundle of checks, one for each individual that had sacrificed for our company. And they gave those checks out individually to employees with instructions to say, thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your commitment to this company. That's what the money went for first, not anything else. To me, that was the best day of my career. It really showed Michelin values and respect for people. And those people remember to this day. That's not something that goes away. That's an investment in the future. Well, I retired in 2000, at the end of 2011. My blood pressure went down by 20 points. I slept in the morning until now. And I had an opportunity with a good friend and his son to invest in a business. And so I'm here to tell you that playing with your own money is a little different than playing with somebody else's. Okay. So I see a lot of nods. We bought a small plant in Camden, South Carolina. It had been owned by a venture capital firm. Any venture capitalists in the room? Good, I'm not going to offend anybody else. But these people, I'm sure, are financially very savvy, but operationally they were, to put it politely, obtuse. Okay. This plant they were going to use to process byproducts of chicken plants and turn it into biofuel. And they invested a lot of money in building this facility. And it didn't work. And part of the reason it didn't work is they didn't screen any of the product coming in, so their pumps and equipment got clogged with bones and everything else. But a young man that I was working with runs a business pumping fat traps. You may know Patrick has a truck, and he pumps. The business model is he pumps fat traps. People pay you to pump a fat trap. You know Patrick has. Good man, good young man. And so he was doing this, and of course he gets paid roughly 20-25 cents a gallon to pump out fat trap. And every restaurant and food facility everywhere has it, and you have to pump it out by a certain frequency. And so he gets paid for that, but he was having trouble finding a good place to unload. You can't just dump it. And he saw this plant and knew that it would work. It's high tech compared to the typical processing of fat trap pumpkins. And I went down with him and looked at it, and his father did too. And we helped Patrick design a business model, and it looked so good we had to pinch ourselves. And the one thing Patrick didn't have was real process knowledge and equity. Equity is a problem. And so we bought in with Patrick to buy this place, and they sold it to us for pennies on the dollar, which is a great thing. I know Alan's been down to visit with me, and a couple other of my friends have been down, and they keep on shaking their heads saying, why to do this? What have we discovered? Well, probably stuff that you already know. One is, it's going to take longer and cost more than you thought. Is that right? Yeah. So we thought we'd be started up at the end of the year. However, the application process for the sewer permit with Kershaw County took over 4 months. And right now we're waiting on the final permit, which is from DHEC, to allow us to start up. I was hoping I'd be able to say today, and we got it this week, but so far we have every indication we're going to get it, but we don't have it yet. The interesting thing is a lot of things I learned working for a big company like Michelin and Procter & Gamble before that are still true with small business. One is you really have to have a business model. You can't just wing it, okay? You need to know what your targets are and how you're going to do it. But the second thing, and maybe the first thing, is you really have to have good people. And in a small company, good people perhaps are more precious than in a large company. That's simply because the impact of losing one good person is more dramatically felt. And we hired 2 people soon after we bought the plant who are both really good people. And even though we have not started up, we have kept them on the payroll so that they're locked into us. They know our commitment to them, and they're committed to us. One is a technical guy who's rebuilt pumps and saved us a ton of money. The other is going to be the operations manager for the plant who really knows that system extremely well. So we're dangerously close to starting up. We had a small business association loan that took 3 months to get, but I understand 3 months is not bad for an SBA loan. I didn't know that. It seemed long to me. But we're about to start, and we're optimistic about our prospects for real success. One of the joys for me that has come from this has been mentoring Patrick and a couple other people in town who like to talk about what's going on in their professional career and bounce ideas off me. And that's been a real enjoyable part of my semi-retirement. One thing I wanted to close on is talk to you a little bit about the lessons of respecting people really crosses the boundaries into focusing on respecting all people. Respecting all people means inviting their full participation, listening to their ideas even when they're different than our own. Our country was built on diversity. I've been to, I think last time I counted, 40-something different countries in this world. No one has the diversity of the United States. We're a country of immigrants. Very few of us have Native American blood. And so all of us came here, different backgrounds, different creeds, different colors, and that has made us successful because we've had to listen to each other and use the best of what's there. To prove that point, there's no better place to go on the week of Memorial Day than Arlington National Cemetery. So come with me to Arlington and let's see the diversity that's there. Let's walk in Memorial Drive and we'll go first to Section 5. In Section 5, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., captain in the United States Army, but better known as probably the most famous Supreme Court judge that we've ever had. I've read a lot of his publications, and the quote that came from Oliver Wendell Holmes that I love the most is, "The mind of a bigot is like the pupil of an eye. The more light you shine on it, the more it will contract." Buried not 3 paces from Oliver Wendell Holmes is Admiral Hyman Rickover. Anybody from the nuclear navy? Admiral Rickover was a Jewish admiral who was passionate about nuclear power and is known as the father of the United States Nuclear Navy. Admiral Rickover said, "More than ambition, more than ability, it is rules that limit contribution. Rules are the lowest common denominator of human behavior. They are a substitute for rational thought." What a contribution. Right behind Section 5, because it's not in numerical order, is Section 2. And in Section 2, one of the first graves that you see is Air Force General Daniel Chappie James, first African-American 4-star flag officer in the United States military. A veteran of World War II, of Vietnam, and of Korea. His quote is, "The power of excellence is overwhelming. It is always in demand, and nobody cares about its color." Now you have to wander a ways to get to Section 8. Section 8, they're not in numerical order, but in Section 8 you find Major Marie-Therese Rossi, the first woman pilot killed in Desert Storm, the first woman to lose her life flying in a combat zone. She says, "Sometimes you have to disassociate how you feel personally about the prospect of going into war and possibly seeing death that's going to be there. But personally, as an aviator, as a soldier, this is the moment that everybody trains for, that I've trained for, so I feel ready to meet the challenge." If we walk back up Roosevelt Boulevard to Section 30, we find Air Force Lieutenant General Elwood Richard Pete Quesada. At the end of World War II, everybody from General of the Army Eisenhower to ordinary infantrymen recognized Pete Quesada as the premier expert and dogged patron of close air support. His quote was, "On the ground and in the air, we must be a single team." Jewish, Christian, African American, Hispanic, white, old money, no money. It's the story of our nation. It's the story of our excellence. And it's available to you and to me in our organizations, tapping into that diversity. Someday, my father will be buried at Arlington. He's 94. He's still in great health. 94 years old. He enlisted in the Marine Corps right after World War II began, Pearl Harbor. He had a degree from Erskine, but he told me he wanted to go fight for this country. Private Wilkerson. Platoon Sergeant Wilkerson, World War II. Company Commander Wilkerson in the Korean War. Commander of the 1st Marine Regiment in Vietnam. Commanding General of Fleet Forces in the Pacific when he retired. His quote is, "If you aspire to be a leader, first learn to respect the people around you." Thank you.
Mic on? This is mic on now. Very fortunately, we have a few minutes for some question and answer. So, Dick, I'm going to ask you to join us up on the podium for just a few more minutes. And you can take the place on the podium because I'll be back up there for just a few minutes to make the presentation. So we have time for a few questions, and if you would, just make those questions very specific. So, who's first?
Don't be shy. I love questions.
Yes, don't everybody raise their hands at once. It confuses me. Tim Justice.
Tell us about your community involvement, what you do.
Well, to me, Greenville is a very, very special place. And when I came here in 1980, people welcomed me, and they gave me a lot, and I feel like giving back to the community. There are a couple areas where I especially have passion. One is early childhood education through the Institute for Child Success. I think that's just critically important. It makes real social sense because the more we invest in 0 to 5, the less we have to pay later on. It pays for itself. I didn't understand that when I started the Michelin Challenge Education program because that was oriented toward primary schools, which is still really, really helpful. I mean, having volunteers show up Friday to help teachers instead of criticize them, I think is a really good thing. But I think we get more bang for the buck on early childhood education. And then the rest of the work, United Way does so much for our community, so I've been deeply involved in that. The first time I ever had to raise money in my life was when I was chair of the campaign in 2010 after 2 years of not meeting the goal. And I've been blessed in my life that I've had really good people around me. And it really helps because the staff at United Way, plus the volunteers I had in the organization, were just tremendous. And it was a real learning experience for me. This is a special community. There's a satisfaction that comes from all of us giving together in this community to make it a better place.
Next question, right back here. Yep.
Good morning, and
Good.
thank you for waking up early.
I'm not really awake yet.
I'm an immigrant, and you mentioned the diversity, but my question is more, I was raised, I'm Jewish, I am Colombian, and I had the benefit of being mentored early on in my first job with my grandfather. And my question to you is, you briefly mentioned mentorship. Is there, in companies such as Michelin and Procter & Gamble, is there a standard mentorship program for associates or people? Because, the leadership has a lot to do with mentoring people itself.
At Michelin, we've had that going from time to time. I think it's going well. Lisa Owens is here, used to head that up for us. And I'm sure she would talk to you about how that's going right now. She's moved to a different position now, but nevertheless, I know you're still intimately involved in it and know what's going on. But I think it's really, really key. The more companies can do that, I think the more rapidly people grow and are able to contribute more. And I think it's well worthwhile. Sometimes it doesn't have to be in your company either. Sometimes it's somebody you know that you respect, that you trust, where you can voice the deep concerns you have about what you see in your life and in your career.
Next question, please. Right here. We'll come to the back next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now the student treasurer, retired commissioner, and new treasurer of the company. I'm going to ask you a question, and you may not want to. I know that the chambers of commerce across North America tend to be supporting something called Common Core across America. Having worked in Columbia, across the state, with the legislature, it's got something through our legislature here, trying to relate parts of it. Would you be willing to broach the subject of how you feel that Common Core is going to affect the school system of South Carolina? I feel like South Carolina has high quality people that can do things well ourselves.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it. As long as I will express my personal opinion, please don't attribute it to either the local or state chamber of commerce. Otis Rawl will come hunt for me if I speak for him. I used to do that when I was chairman there, but I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not enthusiastic one way or the other about Common Core. I am about common standards. But the standard I prefer is work keys. And I've been a proponent of using work keys. I told Bert Royster that I'd rather have a work key certification than a high school diploma. That it means more to business, it is more validated, it's run by ACT, and that's what I think we ought to be doing. It is job-oriented, it measures skills that you need on the job, and I think that is a better way to go. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you.
Interesting aside, by way of information, leadership of the Greenville Chamber hasn't addressed Common Core, has been asked to address Common Core, and we figure we consider that outside of purview at this point. So let's go to Lori in the back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Dick, I have to say thank you for mentioning one of, actually two of my passions. Of course, the Institute for Child Success is just, you know, my baby, and I was so proud to see early childhood in the chamber really picking that up over the years. And also a second passion, that you are one of the few people that when diversity is mentioned in this community includes religious diversity. And I welcome that. Because, you know, just last week my daughter graduated from a local college in this area and was handed a Christian Bible,
Yeah.
and she turned it down, and I think that's so sad